Okay, so one of the things that we're always asked, or at least I'm always asked, is if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, what should I do? Well, we got on Anchor because when we were trying to figure out how to distribute content or how to be able to record easily, Anchor's worked best for us. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors you want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. So, if you've always wanted to start a podcast, make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. Welcome to Autisable Dads, Life with Autism from a Parent's Perspective. With each episode, Rob and I talk with media professionals, business owners, and nonprofits to discuss what they are doing to help families get the services they need and how the public perceives autism. We also talk with other autism parents and autistic individuals about their life and autism. Today, we're talking with Ben Lewin via phone, whose journey into storytelling is just as inspiring as the movies that he helped to create. Impacted by polio at a young age, he understands the nuances of living with a disability, and this carries over into the stories that he's able to share throughout his career. To share a bit of his life and background, here's what he has on his profile on the IMDb website. Ben Lewin's career as a writer and director is spread across 3 continents and includes award-winning documentaries, feature films, TV movies, miniseries, and episodic programs. Born in Poland in 1946, he migrated to Australia with his family in 1949. As a young man, Lewin showed great passion for photography and creative writing, and also studied and practiced law. He left his work as a criminal barrister when he was offered a scholarship to the National Film School in England. After graduating, he joined BBC Television as a director on the nationwide program, followed by other documentary and current affairs programs for Thames, Granada, and Channel 4 TV. His breakthrough project as a writer-director was The Case of Cruelty to Prawns. It's a comedy drama that won the Best Television Film Award at the prestigious Melbourne Film Festival. Some of Ben's notable credits include the murder mystery feature Georgia, starring Judy Davis, which won 8 Australian Film Institute nominations. The much-honored and multi-award-winning The Nunera Boys, starring Bob Hoskins, the true story of 2,000 English Jews who were mistakenly suspected as Nazi spies and transported to Australia in 1940. The award-winning Matter of Convenience, a telemovie about marriages and convenience with Jean-Pierre Cassel, and Plead Guilty, Get a Bond, about a tribal Aboriginal woman and her conflict with the Australian legal system. Ben Lewin is best known in the U.S. as the writer and director of comedy features. Paperback Romance, a love story about slightly damaged people starring Anthony LaPaglia and Gia Carides, and the messianic farce The Favor, The Watch, and The Very Big Fish, starring Bob Hoskins, Jeff Goldblum, and Natasha Richardson. More recently, Ben Lewin brought his distinctive mix of the preposterous and the perceptive to Hollywood Gold, a personal documentary of his misadventures in the Beverly Hills jewelry trade at Oscar time. His episodic television work includes the season's highest-rating episode of Ally McBeal and Touched by an Angel, as well as a number of episodes of the most popular drama series in Australia, Sea Change. Lewin's most recent accomplishment is the award-winning feature film The Sessions, a moving true-life story based on the sexual awakening of Berkeley-based poet and journalist Mark O'Brien, who spent most of his life in an iron lung. Starring Oscar nominees John Hawkes and William H. Macy and Oscar winner Helen Hunt, the film won numerous international awards, including audience awards at the 2012 Sundance, San Sebastian, and Mill Valley Film Festivals, as well as a 2012 Sundance Special Jury Prize for Ensemble Cast. In 2013, the lead cast of The Sessions garnered 2 Independent Spirit Awards for Best Male Lead and Best Supporting Actress, as well as 2 Golden Globe nominations in the same categories and an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. An Australian at heart, Ben has been living and working in California since 1994 and is in development on a number of feature film and television projects. His portfolio and interests are diverse and include, of course, his wife, producer Judy Levine, and 3 children. Due to polio, he often walks with crutches and gets odd looks and questions asking what happened. A typical response of his is that he's a retired cat burglar. No doubt that Ben isn't retired, as his gentle demeanor has stolen hearts with his recent movie starring Dakota Fanning, Please Stand By. Now, let's listen in as we chat with Ben about this project. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Ben, and taking a few moments of your time today to discuss the movie Please Stand By. Now, I'm curious as to how you came across this script and exactly at what moment while reading it you said to yourself, this story needs to be told and I'm the one who needs to do this.
Usually I make a decision by about page 2. If I've gotten to page 2 in a script and really want to be there, then that's often a deciding factor. The major deciding factor is always the central character and the journey they're going on. And this was different. I mean, there's no question that, wow, I hadn't read this sort of story before. And it felt real. It not only felt totally different, it felt very real. And I was intrigued by the character. And I thought, okay, I'll hop on this train and see where it goes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a parent of an autistic kid, I mean, my son's 14, and he's nonverbal autistic. I found the main character, Wendy, her encounters with the public to be that complex side of things. And it was very true to when I take my own son out in public. You know, those odd looks.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And when I was watching the show with my wife, we found that the movie very clearly shows how people respond differently to that level of vulnerability. I don't know if I've ever seen this as clearly portrayed in any other film or TV program. And from what you're telling me, this was one of those journeys that really drew you to the story.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you and your wife watched it in that way. I mean, I didn't know. To me, it kind of worked on a number of levels. One, it was like a bit like the Canterbury Tales. You know, there was a kind of a journey, a pilgrimage, and along the way, you know, our heroine met bad people, good people, people who understood, people who didn't. And, you know, there's a kind of, it's a very accessible metaphor. You know, life is a journey. Every day is a journey. Every project is a journey. And this was, this was just one that was kind of full of color and intrigue. And a character, I must say that one of the real challenges that I liked was that, like a lot of people, my image of autism had been really kind of laid down by Rain Man, by this kind of, you know, robotic character who was a kind of a mathematical super brain.
Right.
And what this particular script brought was a really different insight, one that was more focused on women and the differences, the greater need for emotional connection, I think that was behind it. But I guess just that it really opened your mind to the diversity of autism and, you know, developmental issues like that really there was no common denominator.
Right.
Maybe apart from, I guess the common denominator I was sensing was this kind of isolation, that sense of being cut out from a lot of things.
Right.
And the struggle to connect. But I don't claim to be any more of an expert than when I started. I'm just kind of really grateful, that I was given a bit of an education in the process. And I'm very grateful that finally, people in the autism community related to that character, which you never know when you're starting off.
Yeah. I mean, I know when we were watching this film, we were taking a look at it and we were seeing all the dynamic of how you were portraying autism.
Yeah.
And because I've been around in the autism community for a while, I recognized one specific person that you had in the film. It was Lexi Aaron. Lexi Aaron.
Who?
Lexi. She sung.
Lexi. Lexi's great.
Yeah. So I recognized her because she worked with Elaine Hall.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful kind of guiding hand for the whole business.
Yeah, she's great, and for those who don't know Elaine Hall, for those listening, she's done the Miracle Project. She also works as a autism consultant on TV and film. But there were a bunch of other autistic individuals who played themselves right at the beginning of the film in the group home, which I thought was fantastic. Just a quick question on that note. How was your experience working with all these autistic individuals on the film? And what would be some tips or advice you could pass along to other autistic individuals looking to get hired into the industry?
Look, I'm hesitant about giving advice because if I had any good advice to give, I'd take it myself. But from the point of view of a filmmaker working with people with autism, it was a no-brainer. I mean, I could not imagine, having that group home full of people who were extras. Do you know what I mean? The kind of people that you use in crowd scenes or background. I thought, how are they ever going to understand? And the fact that I had access to all these people was an unusual luxury. I think Dominique, one of the guys there, has been geting more work. I imagine that he's got himself an agent, and there is, I don't know what you'd call it, but there's a kind of autism chic in a way in the media business, and that you have more and more characters on the spectrum, who are actually intriguing characters for the audience to watch. It's not as if, it's not as if they're put in the context of kind of bleeding heart movies. These are actually fascinating characters doing unexpected things. So I think there's, enormous possibilities, and particularly when filmmakers realize that you're not dealing with any kind of problematic issues. You're dealing with people who are just going to be just as effective on screen as if as anyone else. So I mean, I'm kind of a bit of a special needs character myself, and it's kind of really gratifying that there's some sort of movement, in the not only amongst autistic people, but in disabled people generally, to participate in the media.
Oh, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, reading up on your life, you're an inspiration yourself, with all the things that you've gone through. And being able to convey that as part of your life, to convey that into the movies that you help craft and create is incredible. I'm
just a survivor, I guess. You get a really strong survival instinct when you got some crap to carry.
Yeah. Now, of course, as we go through all these projects, we're trying to get these things, you're doing a research and all that type of stuff. I noticed in an interview in Den of Geeks that you stated your personal experiences, these experiences that we're talking about right now, gave you a special take on things, like to avoid sentimentality or to avoid the kind of rah-rah aspect of it and try to have a kind of little window into real life. Now,
yeah.
do you remember that interview? And
Yeah.
if so, for our listeners, what did you mean by this? And was the level of complexity in the movie and the script already there, or was it something that you wanted to highlight this as a director?
Well, when you know, the process from script to screen is, it's a work in progress until they tell you it's finished and go away.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we refined that aspect of it. But your question was really, that sense of a personal connection. I know what it's like to be in a situation where you have a sibling, an older sibling, who is responsible for a special needs sibling. I kind of have seen that relationship in my own family. I've seen it in other families, and that was of particular interest to me. And the other thing that I really connected with was the complexity of being a writer, which is kind of a disease in itself. And I thought, okay, this connection between being a writer and having autism, it's sort of, there was this kind of sense of, here was a character with creativity kind of boiling inside her. Mm-hmm. And the way to get it out was through this connection with a kind of a intergalactic fantasy. And that was a strong emotional connection with me, the struggle of the writer to tell his or her story. So, I don't know, it ticked some unexpected boxes, and I think that to live with a movie for as long as you have to live with it, you have to have an emotional connection with it.
Oh yeah, I agree with that, and I see that in this particular film. There's a lot of emotional connections between the characters, the actors, and the characters, and how the direction went. And of course, with that research behind that, I've read that you did a quite bit of research on Star Trek, including having a marathon of the original series.
Yeah. Well, that was quite fun, and I really binged watched until I could no longer, and and tried to be as religious about it. I mean, we had the world's leading Klingon language expert take us through every syllable of the Klingon scene. And there are all sorts of little Star Trek symbols tucked away in the movie.
Oh yeah.
Like we filmed, a scene at Vasquez Rocks where Kirk battled the Gorn, and obviously a lot of people got it.
Well, of course you have Patton Oswalt and Dakota Fanning speaking Klingon, which of course. Yes. I have to ask this question. Every episode I have an oddball question. I'm going to throw this one out to you. Did you direct a scene with the Klingon conversation in Klingon?
Oh, I wanted to not have any subtitles. So that the whole thing would take place in Klingon and we wouldn't know a word of what they said. So yes, I was prepared to direct the scene in Klingon.
Wow, that would have been interesting.
In pantomime, but the producers kind of reminded me, look, people do speak English, and maybe it might be a kind of a proper nod in that direction to have subtitles and so on.
Right.
But I was all for. I could have happily done the whole movie in Klingon.
I'll definitely let that one know. Yeah. Now you mentioned before, but we just discussed about how your experience, having that connection of
Yes.
of dealing with a disability and having that connection there. How does this film, now you've done previous films that touch point on disabilities and all that. How does this film, a story about an individual with autism, compare to your other films regarding a disability? And what are some of the things that you've learned in making these types of films since the start of your career?
Well, the biggest point of comparison is this movie is one that I did not write myself. And that was a big attraction. Wow, someone else went through that ordeal. And it took me out of myself more than those other movies did, in which I was drawing much more on my own experience and, or similarity of character. I thought, okay, this is a movie where it's definitely not about me or anything that I'm really familiar with, but I can identify with it just the same. So it was, I was detached, but close at the same time, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. There are a few moments in the film where Wendy, played by Dakota Fanning, is having what we'd call a sensory overload or a meltdown. And
yes.
And the phrase, the title of the movie, "Please Stand By," is repeated as sort of a calming mechanism for her. When addressing the one scene where Scotty, Tony Collette, who's a therapist, and Wendy's sister, Audrey, played by Alice Eve, they deal with Wendy, she's hitting, she ends up on the floor and being restrained by Scotty. How did you approach this scene? I mean, as a parent of a child on the spectrum who has these issues, I know seeing any person going through that type of situation may come as a shock. How did you approach that?
Well, I was really a bit shocked at first to see sequences on YouTube of autistic meltdowns, real ones.
Right.
And I thought, the people who are filming this are doing it to help other people understand.
Right.
They're not doing it for entertainment. And I really struggled with myself about what degree should I take it to. And, there are all sorts of issues. One is you don't want to hurt anybody in the process of shooting a scene. You just need to keep it safe for the participants. At the same time, you want to get some kind of sense of shock.
Right.
And I guess we just choreographed it instinctively, as realistically as we could without going to an extreme, because it to some extent defined the functionality of that character.
Right.
And she had to be seen as someone who was occasionally vulnerable to a meltdown, but someone who was still independent enough to go out and face the world and get on a bus to God knows where.
Right. Well, I think that scene,
the balancing act.
Yeah, and I think you guys balanced it well.
Thank you.
Yeah, because as somebody who deals with a lot of content for our particular site and gets sent a lot of content in regards to review, especially some of those types of videos that you were mentioning, having that balancing act to not go too far, I think you guys did well.
Yeah.
Addressing the diversity of topics associated with autism is something that we constantly do on the podcast, regularly discuss on Autisable.com. I only have one other question, and I really appreciate you taking these moments to discuss all these topics. I'm going to list a bunch of links of a lot of the other interviews you've already done on this movie in a blog post.
Yes.
So I don't want to rehash something that you've already answered 1,000 times over again, which you've done brilliantly.
That's all right.
So it's just a respect of your time, and I think our listeners' time, because if they're interested, they're going to click some more. And we have you did some great interviews elsewhere, and I don't want to rehash something that doesn't need to be rehashed. You've spoken eloquently in other spots. Our particular community has parents, professionals, and of course autistic individuals. And just like the autism community overall, we're a pretty eclectic group of folks with a bunch of points of view. Now, I asked the members of our community if they could ask one question to you. What would that question be? The biggest response from both parents and those who are autistic was why the word autism was never used in the film. A few folks liked that the word autism wasn't used, while some argued that, quote, we didn't want to define her with a label, unquote, as a weak response. What would your response be in this regard?
There are two responses. One, it wasn't in the script, and I was respecting the wishes of the author. Okay. And also, when I started to research things and went to visit group homes, and I would ask the manager of the group home who was showing me around about particular individuals, to talk about them. They would never talk about their diagnosis. These were people with a variety of developmental issues, not necessarily autism. Some were severe anxiety disorder or similar. But they never talked about them by referring to a diagnosis, or that person's got this, or that person's this, or that person's that. They only ever referred to them as, in terms of their particular issues. Oh, she doesn't like, going into the bathroom, in such and such a way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so talk about the individual characteristics.
Right, so it's more about the individual and their struggles, not about the diagnosis of the individual.
Yes, and because often, the spectrum is so broad and it does overlap with conditions that are described in other ways. I thought, what does it matter?
Right.
These are people with issues that are different from the obvious ones. They're not amputees. They're not kind of deaf or blind. These are what you call developmental issues, for lack of a better description, if you like.
Right, and the main character just happened to have autism.
I've seen people struggle with language for as long as I've been alive. And the desperate struggle for euphemisms to often conceal what is the truth. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I went to a school which was described as a school for crippled children. Now, heaven forbid anyone should use that kind of language these days.
Right.
And I guess it gave me a sense of the irrelevance of labels.
Right.
And so I'm sort of, I don't regret that decision. I think that, people got the movie regardless of whether we specifically mentioned autism or not. I don't think there was any doubt about the kind of people we were dealing with.
Right.
But they're the two things that influenced me most: the writer's wishes in the first place, and the fact that professionals in the field really didn't care too much about the labels, and the really good people only related to their, the people they cared for as in terms of their individual characteristics.
No, great points. Great points. Thank you very much.
But I certainly, it's interesting that there has been that kind of discussion, and I may have been wrong. I mean, these are decisions you often make on the fly.
Oh yeah. No, it's just it was a good question that
It's a very good question.
Yeah, I just bringing it up.
Yes, no. I hope that I've provided some kind of logical response.
No, I appreciate it. No, thank you very much. I think, with all the other questions that you get asked and all these other types of things, you yourself as a reminder of, to the people listening, you yourself were impacted by polio at a young age. And
yeah, when I was about 6.
yeah, and as I mentioned in the intro, that influenced, that level of experience has really helped you become the filmmaker that you are today. And
well, I have a certain sensitivity and attraction to other people who aren't perfect.
yeah.
If you like, I admire imperfection.
Well, if we were all perfect, we'd be really boring.
Yeah, really boring.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but personally, I found Please Stand By a study in how we as a society treat people. It's not those grandiose expected gestures as one would expect in most films. I think that there are those subtleties in the film that oftentimes get overlooked by most people, but those of us in the autism community, we can easily identify. And
it's a kind of like it's one of those epics in a way. It's sort of a very modest epic, like the Odyssey or the Canterbury Tales.
Right.
That life is a kind of that every time you step out the door, it's sort of a series of tests and obstacles.
Right. Exactly.
You meet good people, and
right. Yeah, you have those odd looks, the dismissive responses, those strange and even rude comments or actions.
Yeah, people would ask me, why was the bus driver so nasty? And I said, well, haven't you ever met a nasty bus driver in your life? I mean, why does every bus driver have to be nice? Anyway,
right.
I got a bit of flack over having an unnecessarily nasty bus driver, but
people are people.
Yes.
That's I think the reality of it is.
Yes.
And it's I think what it's showcasing in this at the beginning of this, I was mentioning how we're not really seeing up until this movie, in my wife's eyes and my eyes, what life is like with autism on a daily basis. It's Wendy going through, and you get those looks and her sensory issues and those issues of, to us, it's commonplace. It doesn't, people glaze over a lot of that.
Have you seen a movie called The Black Balloon?
No, I read somewhere that you mentioned that movie, and now I got to go see it. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, it's very, very different and it's tough going, some of it, but it really does get right into that sort of what happens to the sibling issue in a major way. Also, Toni Collette. So here am I recommending someone else's movie, but now I've started to get interested in all movies of that subject. So.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think you should.
Yeah, she's done some really good stuff here and there. Yeah, absolutely. So appreciate you. Thank you very much for taking some time with us today. I really wish you a lot of success in this film and in your next film that you have coming up. Yes.
The catcher was a spy. That's an oddball thing too.
It is. It's based on a true story. Did I read that right?
Absolutely. Yes. About a baseball star who became a spy. Yeah. You can see I'm attracted to everything oddball.
I personally found Please Stand By a study in how we as a society treat people. Wendy, the lead character, is an independent woman, regardless if people identify her as autistic or not. She was undervalued, her ideas dismissed and or misunderstood by those closest to her, including her family and professionals. But she pushes through all of her own personal challenges to get to her goal. In her journey, the movie showcases how dismissive we as people can be, how compassionate or rude we can be, and how there can be that internal struggle some may go through when they see someone in need and not know exactly what to do. The issue of her being on the spectrum just highlights these issues even more, as it's because of her challenges we are able to see how other characters' actions impact how she acts. I appreciate our guest, Ben Lewin, for addressing several questions, and there's never enough time to pick someone's brain regarding the media and this ongoing topic of autism. If you'd like to continue this discussion, please feel free to join Autisable.com and share them. You can also follow us via social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. As a reminder, this podcast is available on Spotify, Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, I'm your co-host, Joel Manzer, and thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Autisable Dads, Life with Autism, from a parent's perspective.